Okay, last and not least is Tropical John. Trop and I have been friends for a long time. He's been in the business going back to when he was recommending and selling all the nasty things. He caught on to it a little bit slower than I did, but not a whole lot.
Not by far.
He's been in the landscape business. He, as I told you earlier, is in the pond business, did the water feature that we have that you saw the slides of. He's got our spray rig that he was going to bring today and had a little flat tire problem, but he'll tell you about it. And when we've been experimenting, he and I have been working together on this idea about spraying BTI all over the place. So, Trop, tell them about what you're up to.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate y'all having me. Save the best for last. How about that? I started all this, I've been in the landscape nursery business since I was 15 years old. Well, let's go to 13. My Eagle Scout project, I landscaped a section of a nursing home, maintained it for a few months, and went to work for the nursery that my parents drugged me to every Sunday afternoon. Been had my hands in the dirt ever since. Got involved with Howard Garrett. I opened up my store in Rockwall in 1988, went 100% organic in 1990. When I took the last of the nasty chemicals down the street to the local feed store, he was actually hoping I was closing the doors. I said, here, just take them, they're gone. And we went 100% organic, probably one of the first nurseries. There were about 5 or 6 of us back then. Along with Howard, I'm right above Lake Ray Hubbard. I was never comfortable using chemicals in my yard, especially in the vegetable garden. That just never made a whole lot of sense to me. And like Tony was telling you earlier, my idea of good insect control at my house is let the insects have it. If they're going to be a pain to work with, I'm going to plant something different. Vegetables can be a little bit different, but the lifeblood of what we're doing, and I'm going to talk a little bit about Compost Tea, and we're going to skip to, I'm just going to put this one slide up here. We'll get past a lot of this stuff. I do this all over the, I work for South and Supply, so we actually cover a 7-state area, and it's kind of fun to go around to areas outside the Metroplex. You know, Dallas-Fort Worth is so different from anywhere else in the country because of that man sitting over there. The organic products that are available to us here are amazing. You know, we're getting it in Austin, San Antonio, Houston, they're all good. You go as far away, even up in Tulsa, we're just now breaking new ground up there to some all organic nurseries. I got one in Tulsa, one in Oklahoma City, 100% organic. Very excited to see that happen. Compost tea is the lifeblood of what we do. Back in the day, Howard would get on the radio and start talking about a new product and drove us nursery people crazy because y'all would come into our stores and say, Howard's talking about this today. And then we'd buy and sold Garrett juice for years, and he'd tell everybody how to make compost tea on their own. We're like, man, you're not helping the cause here, sir. We need to sell your stuff. Well, I'm a firm believer in what comes out of that bottle, but what's really good is how to make your own compost tea and to spray the liquids over your property. And it's a very, very simple procedure. About 5 years ago, I started a project with a good customer of mine that had some issues, chemical problems, that she couldn't be around chemical stuff, and everything was organic. She had a 200-foot row of photinias that we began to treat. And when I got to the property, there was 50% of them were at least 50% dead. They were in bad shape. Bacterial leaf spot. You know, it's one of those plants. She was keeping them at 6 foot tall. They were 15 years old. Everything that could have gone wrong was going wrong, and they were in really bad shape. This was my first actual hands-on experience with the Sick Tree program. And where we came in, we aerated the root zone. We put down compost, molasses, cornmeal, a good organic fertilizer. But the key to what we were doing, and I'm a firm believer in this, is the liquid applications that I began. This was the actual first time that I worked with plants on a very regular basis. At that time, I used my 3-gallon steel backpack sprayer to spray these photinias, and we were using a combination of Garrett juice and actually BioWash in that mixture. And I became very personally acquainted with these photinias, because you can imagine how long it took me to do 200 feet of photinias with a 3-gallon backpack sprayer. I filled that tank sprayer quite often. We did the sick tree treatment, we did the root zone application, And in the beginning, in May and in June, I was spraying those. These guys were so bad, I was spraying them every 2 weeks. And when you do a foliar application, you need to keep in mind that you're not trying to saturate it, you're not trying to water the plant, you're putting a fine mist over the foliage, you spray it on there and keep moving. One of the things that I like to do is I spray late in the day, because the pores, the stomata of the plants open up late, and especially in the summertime, they're going to be trying to not lose water, so they're shut tight during the day. So I'll do this late in the evening so that the compost tea and the mixture stays on there a shorter period of time, because you're going to feed your plants through the foliage. Plants will take up as much nutrients through the leaves as they will through the root system when you foliar feed these guys. So we're spraying these guys down, and in July, August, and September, I was just doing a monthly application. By September, I talked to Howard. I said, "You're not going to believe what I'm seeing here." Because everything I've learned about fungal issues, about bacterial leaf spot, is that that does not go away. The leaves fall off. I'm here to tell you, I watched those photinias begin to heal themselves. I watched the bacterial leaf spot slowly disappear and become healthy. By the time that process, by the second year of this process that we did the stick tree treatment again in the fall, I did it again in the spring, the ground application, and then we began to the liquid spraying just on a 4-week period, once a month. The difference is absolutely amazing. Now, I also got her to quit trimming them all the time, which helped, because again, I had a conversation with a lady about screens, and we were talking about my property where I've actually planted a handful of photinias out there. Well, I'm not planning on keeping these things at 6 foot. I'm going to let them do what Mother Nature wants them to do. They're going to grow in their own way. Once they're established, these guys are on their own. So, you know, planting the right plant in the right place is very important, but the spraying of the liquid feeding of this compost tea is just amazing. What you get out of the bottles, the Garrett Juice Plus, which was a really good product when they added the liquid fish to it, a little smelly, that's okay. That smell dissipates fairly quickly and is so beneficial to the plant. The idea of using that biowash in there is it literally washes, cleanses the leaves, and makes the plant more available to take up those nutrients that are on there. So it's washing off disease pathogens, it's helping with insect eggs, and making that compost tea work even better. The third year, I actually decided that, you know what, I've tried an organic fertilization program in the Rockwall area and was using all dry material, and I priced myself right out of the market. It was too expensive, and it just wasn't getting the results I needed. And so I finally broke down and bought a 100-gallon sprayer, a little power sprayer, to do my compost tea applications. Boy, it made that photinia spraying go a whole lot faster. What took me 3 hours took me about 30 minutes to go through it, and we were able to treat some of their trees. We were able to spray up 30 feet and add, and I'm kind of a mad scientist as far as adding different things. I'll play with different mixtures. We'll take compost tea and we'll take a little bit more seaweed. Sometimes I'll add a little bit more molasses. And one of the keys that I started actually doing last year, I got this recipe, actually, a different way to make compost tea from a friend of ours, Sabino Cortez, who has a little company called Erath Earth. And what we found out, I actually at my store, I brewed fresh compost tea. And it was a process that we thought at the time would take 2 or 3 days to accomplish making your tea. What we're finding out is the biology that's happening right away, that's happening in your tea, is actually growing almost immediately. How many of y'all have your own compost piles at the house? That's great, that's great. That is such a good source. What we're wanting to do, and you hear Howard talk, we've talked on the radio many times about not removing anything from your property. Leaves, grass clippings. When I take my own, do my perennial beds and cut everything down, everything gets thrown into the grass, I mulch over it, the bulky stuff goes into the compost pile. So I'm throwing stuff constantly into the grass. Never have a problem with thatch because we've got the microbial activity breaking things down and making things work. So you have your ingredient list here, 5-gallon bucket. And again, the reason we're going to talk about going into your own, making your homemade fresh compost tea is the biology in there, because it is so full of life. So I want you to reach down into your compost pile. You get your 5-gallon bucket, you can fill it with water. Reach down into your compost pile to the part of the compost that is not resembling anything you put into it. That's why Tony was talking about most of your bag compost. It says compost is just, it's not ready. It needs to go further. So a good finished compost is going to look like soil, and it's going to have a healthy, rich, earthy smell to it. Reach down into that pile, chunk it in the bucket. How many of y'all have places in your yard that I can grow something over here really good, but I plant the same thing over here, but it doesn't do very good at all? We all have areas that grow really well. I want you to go to that area that's growing really well and grab a handful of that soil, chunk it in the bucket, because something's happening that's right in there. And I like the biology, the microbial activity that's happening there. So we're going to take that the 5-gallon bucket, you're going to throw that compost in there, and we're going to take an electric drill and just with a paint mixer on the end of it and just drill it. Just sit there and spin it up and get it working and start aerating it. Back in the past, I used to do electric like a pond aerator and let it brew for 24 hours. What we're finding is this agitation, this stuff's starting to grow. And it's growing almost immediately. 15 minutes after you do that, you're ready to throw in some liquid molasses. Man, you're off to the races. The molasses is now feeding the microbes. This stuff's starting to grow. And it's growing as you put it out. I'll take a 5-gallon bucket of this and throw it into my 100-gallon sprayer to inoculate what we're doing with the gallons of Garrett juice that we put in there. My 100-gallon sprayer, I'll use 3 gallons of Garrett Juice Plus. I'll usually throw in a little bit extra of liquid molasses and then a 5-gallon bucket. And oh, by the way, before we dump it in there, we'll take a paint strainer and strain that off so I don't have the big pieces in there. And you heard Howard and I talk about, we ground up some BT, playing with that, and we know that when you put a bacteria into a living compost tea like that, that stuff's growing too. And even the BTIs, when it lasted, that stuff was going to begin to continue to reproduce. So this makes your homemade compost tea, and at this point, what I always call all the extra goodies. This is how you're making compost tea, is always your basis to your Garrett juice. So at that point, you can add your fish, add your liquid molasses. If you're going to spray some type of insecticide, you're doing an orange oil or a biowash, why not feed at the same time? And again, we're going to do this late in the day. One of the things we're finding too, that by spraying late in the day, if you're doing an orange oil, a lot of the beneficials, your bad guys are going to stay tight to your plant, where your beneficials will begin to move off. If they sense they're getting ready to be killed, a lot of those guys are going to move, ladybugs, and they'll come back. So, and if you're spraying that stuff, we want to be concerned about bees. You're never going to beat the bees up in the morning, but you can kind of wait them out in the evening, because as the sun starts going down, these guys are starting to come back to their hives. So that late day spraying, it just makes sense to me to do a late day spraying. When you're doing your yard, whether you're doing your yard, you're doing your shrubs, your plants, we know that fresh compost tea, the liquid sprayings, will help repel a lot of insects as just by doing a compost tea spraying. In my own garden, again, I use a lot of biowash when we're doing when I do my foliar feeding on my vegetable plants, just because of we're trying to kind of stay ahead of the game. All right, we'll do a lot better if that ounce of prevention goes a long way, and that's what we're trying to do with a regular dose of the compost tea. We know that seaweed helps with spider mites, and the liquid fish that I actually had a whitefly problem at my nursery back, right after I went completely organic. And I had an old jug of old nasty Alaskan fish emulsion. If you remember, that's where fish emulsion got its bad name. That was bad stuff. But I was feeding, I actually decided I was going to use this stuff up. I was using a Siphon-X. It's one of those automatic deals you put on the end of your water hose, your spigot, and you can pull nutrients, pull fertilizer and stuff out of a bucket. So we sprayed these plants. I had whiteflies so bad it was almost embarrassing to load things up in people's plants in late August. And I've got a bunch of growers that now use this. We found that the liquid fish, whatever it was, whether it was the oil, smell, whatever, took care of my whitefly problem. It was amazing. And I had tried, that was right when I still had some chemical products at this nursery. None of them did it. None of them did it, but the fish emulsion took did quite a number on those whitefly. So using these things in combination to spray your plants, it's a habit that is just, you'll reap the benefits of. My fertilization program now, I do a fertilization program in Rockwall area. I got some flyers out here for a gentleman in this area, David Spriggs, that also does he's a Garrett juice sprayer just like I am. And I'll do actually 5 applications during the summer. I start out, I still play with a little bit of corn gluten meal. We still don't know whether that stuff works very well, but there's some liquid products of corn gluten that we're hoping that we're going to get better results with. Dry molasses is always a key to my fertilization, and when we do a lawn feeding, we do an entire program. So when we don't just do the grass, we'll come out and do your shrubs and the entire deal. So in March, we'll throw out dry molasses. Man, it's something that you're not really going to overdo. You could do it twice a year, but April, May, June, and July, once a month, we're foliar feeding, and the results are just phenomenal. You'll see things green up, the grass gets thicker. The biggest compliment that I get from our customers on an organic program is how much thicker and how much lusher their grass is and how softer it is to walk on. We're seeing some football fields that I would like to see more athletic complexes that go to an organic program. They find that on football fields, they actually have less injuries because the ground gives. It moves with the players as they're running instead of walking and playing on a hard piece of concrete. So the compost teas that we put in there, the bottled stuff works very well. If you can aerate it and get kind of inoculated initially, it's going to work very well for you. Howard, do you have anything you want to? Or we're good. I think we're going to answer some just general questions too while we're up here. And
a little Q&A, any questions that might come up. One thing that let me say real quickly, and then we'll open up for questions. A lot of you are wondering if it's a good time to fertilize now or not. And I think the thing that I recommended when we first started talking about this organic program that's made maybe as much of a change for people as anything is that you start fertilizing now. It's time for the first fertilization. I was talking to Bob Webster about it on his show down in San Antonio, and it's kind of the same thing. After the first of the year, as soon as you have some nice enough weather to go out and do it, putting out dry molasses as your first fertilization or one of the blend products or corn gluten meal, guessing the timing there is always the trick. It's why we're all not 100% in favor of corn gluten meal as much as we used to be. Still a good fertilizer, good protein, good plant food, but the herbicidal effect of it, it's a real guessing game about when it goes out. But whatever fertilizer you use, that first application going out now, starting to feed that soil, that biology, which we've all been talking about all day long, now it ramps up to the point where the plants start growing in April or whenever that is. So any questions about anything we've talked about today? John and I have been on the radio together answering questions from all different angles, so we ought to be able to help you with something here.
Yeah, you know, and the biggest thing with the chemical guys that you know, we mentioned our friend Uncle Neil. They can't recommend fertilizing right now because they're water-soluble fertilizers. They force plants to grow artificially, which makes for a weakened plant. You know, the chemical guys got a really good thing going. They give you a chemical fertilizer that weakens your plant. Well, now your weakened plant's going to get insects and diseases, so now we're going to sell you a chemical to fix your problem, and then we're going to sell you more chemical fertilizer to get going. So organic fertilizers put out now, the plants are going to use them when they need them. They're not promoting artificial growth. They'll work and build up in the soil.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, the biggest problem about growing anything, John can put his 2 cents in, but the biggest problem in my mind, as long as you're having kind of an organic lifestyle, not putting a lot of toxic materials into the system, is too much water in the leach fields to grow things. So in general, we're for the most part recommending that people keep their herb gardens and vegetable gardens and things like that out of the leach field because it's just too much moisture. Well, everybody's situation would be different, but just as far away as you possibly can. The roots of plants, if they find moisture, they're going to build up in that area, but they won't tend to go on in to where there's too much moisture. You see what I mean? So as long as you stay out of the actual leach zone, I think you're fine. And I don't think there's a toxicity problem or anything unless you're just putting something really bad down the drain.
My barn does not have plumbing, and the plan is to have a compostable toilet put in there. And the kind of standing joke is I'm going to have a sign-up sheet. Because the problem with biosolids, which is human waste, is not the fact that it's my poop. It's the fact that if I'm taking all sorts of antibiotics and, so you got to sign up and tell me what's in it. Other than that, there shouldn't be an issue. So.
Yes, sir.
Everything compost. I see you laughing over there.
What do you plan on doing with the property long term?
Keeping the horses grazing on it.
Livestock grazing. Well, one of the easiest things to do, Tony's talked about, and we've all kind of hit on a little bit, is to get shredded tree trimmings from a tree trimming company that's somewhere working in the area near you to dump the stuff on your property instead of taking it to the landfill. It saves them tipping fees, it saves them gas, and you get a very valuable product. I've done some consulting on some ranches, for example, where there was a cedar problem. Cedar, I don't have that big a problem with if the cedar trees are in the proper place, in the arroyos and the gullies and things in the perimeters and helping with the overall biodiversity. But if they're out on the flat area where you're trying to grow something else, they're a problem. So on this ranch, we had a big experiment going on different ways to take the cedar down. And the ranchers were real open-minded about it, and they ground up the cedar and just wasted it right where the trees were on the ground. The quality of the grass and the forbs that started to grow without even planting anything new was amazing to all the people. So simply getting the ground-up tree trimmings that you see people clearing land at new intersections or new developments or wherever, getting that stuff dumped on your property and spread out is the single most important thing you can do. The other one that goes along with what John was talking about compost tea, one of the most valuable products you can get a hold of comes from the coffee shops and the restaurants. Starbucks used to do it a lot. They're doing it a little less. I think you're about to see some commercial products come on the market that are coffee grounds based. Coffee grounds are one of the best fertilizers around, and they stimulate fungal growth as well as anything. You could put a pile of coffee grounds out and keep it moist, which isn't hard. It's kind of hygroscopic. You'll see some colorful things starting to grow on the coffee grounds. That's beneficial fungus. Throw a handful of that into this compost tea like he was talking about. Again, a cheap or costless way to go to get something that's valuable for your soil.
Yes, sir.
First off, you need to repeat the questions for the internet people. But I talked to the Texas Plant and Soil Lab people and suggested this tree trimming thing, and he said that's one of the worst things you can do.
Well, we don't agree on that point. The question was, one of the people here didn't agree on using tree trimmings, and I think we've repeated the question to some degree with our answers here. What was his point? That there was too much carbon in the tree trimmings?
He said it needed more nitrogen.
Okay. Well, I'll have to have a chat with Frank about that because that's incorrect. One of the things about tree trimmings is that in that one material, you have not only the carbon of the wood that's in it, but you have a lot of protein because of the cambium layers and the buds and the leaves and the green tissue. And that's why when, like Tony was talking about, when you just simply pile it up and leave it there, it'll go faster if you turn it, but you don't have to. You can just leave it piled up. It'll turn into the most beautiful compost you've ever seen. My garden, the experimental gardens at our office, one of the main things that we use in there, and all these people who have seen it, is a real thick layer of raw tree trimmings that we put down. And you use it for the walkways. You can use it in areas that you're going to plant later. You can put it on the ground, and after a fairly short period of time, rake it back, and you'll see that it's building soil and making compost so beautifully. It's hard to beat. So I don't know why he would have that objection. I will certainly find out.
Yeah, we do. I'm very fortunate out at what we've nicknamed Daisy Acres. Is I've got an arborist that drops off those wood chips for us. When we bought the property 4 years ago, when I was just starting on the radio with Howard, I had some family issues and we weren't able to do what we wanted to do out there. Those piles stayed static. When we first dug in here, and you're talking about your clay soils, I will never buy another piece of property that I don't dig a hole first. This is by far, and he's been there, it is the nastiest clay soil I've ever dug in my life. But the gardens that we're planting again finally this year, those static piles have turned into wonderful compost. When we first started digging there wasn't even an earthworm to be found. And it was under a pile of actually cedar that was dropped there that I found my first earthworms, and it was probably a year and a half into the process. You know, when we first moved in, I had one area that I wanted to screen off from my south neighbors. The house was a little undesirable. The local sheriff took care of that problem. But what I did, I knew I was going to be planting there, so I went in there with nothing but dry molasses. And we went up and down there, and this was an area that was probably about 15 foot wide, and then my driveway came down. I'm very fortunate because my significant other, Miss Daisy, does a lot of the mowing. But that first summer, we went through a long drought, and if you know this clay soil, this stuff will open it up and swallow a horse sometimes, and this is bad. I'm driving up and down in September, and I stopped one day, and I started looking at the sides that I had done nothing. This was the first year that we bought this property. The grass was thicker. I had cracks, but they were only about 1 inch wide. The other side, the grass was still thin with cracks 4 to 6 inches wide. And this was nothing but dry molasses. Now we throw a little compost out there on the top of it. You know, and same thing with our garden. We tilled into areas of that garden that had those static piles on them this year. Oh my gosh. I believe if I can keep the grasshoppers off, I'm gonna grow some veggies out there this year. So.
One of the other things that I would recommend anybody starting, trying to improve land, whether you're doing a small garden or you're doing 20,000 acres, any of the 3 major topics that I talked about of the basic program of carbon, organic materials, rock, and sugar that you can put out, and you don't have to do it all at once. However the budget allows, put out one piece at a time, and you will see, just like John was talking about there, using dry molasses. That's one of the first tools I would ever buy to put out on a property is dry molasses. I do the shredded tree trimmings probably first, then the dry molasses. The third thing I might do is either lava sand or some kind of rock mineral. Nothing will help hold the soil moisture at just the right level for a longer period of time than lava sand will. We've had ranchers put it out at 1 ton per acre or so, and they've told me that they've been the only ranch in the county that stayed green through droughts. Rock minerals put out have as much of an ability to hold moisture or more than the compost itself. That's why, to me, they're almost on an equal basis. It's kind of the yin and yang of the soil. It's if you look around the world at the most productive soils in the world, you're always going to see soils that have volcanic rock as part of the soil structure. You know, and that's why we recommend it and have such good luck with it. But you don't have to be real complicated. Yes, ma'am.
Let me bring the microphone to you.
Okay. The formula for, okay.
Give the formula for killing the broadleaf grasses. Or
Okay.
there were 3 parts.
There's 2 ways to go. One, you can do it with the vinegar, Or you can do the broadleafs with that commercial product called garden weasel crabgrass. It's the one that you can put on turf and it'll kill some of the toughest broadleaf weeds around. And it's cinnamon and potassium bicarbonate. We do have, I think, the formula to make a homemade version of that on the website. One of the listeners did that and sent it to us one time. It didn't work quite as well as the commercial product for me, but I might not have mixed it right. The liquid herbicide mixture, the one I like the best is a gallon of 10% white vinegar, real vinegar, like pickling vinegar. You can sometimes buy 8 or 10% in the grocery stores, but the companies that the places where you buy the gardening products will normally have 10%. Into that gallon of 10% vinegar, add 1 to 2 ounces of orange oil. 1 is usually enough, and 1 tablespoon of liquid soap. We used to say put molasses in it, and I've done it both ways, and I haven't seen that it makes that much difference. So you can do that or not. That's an optional ingredient.
Now remember, that's a non-selective, so it's going to
kill
anything that's leafy green. Now you can use it up against the trunks of trees and things like that and be fine. But it's warm, sunny afternoons, leafy green material. So right now in your dormant grasses, you can go in there and spot treat with that and not hurt your grass. Do it in that summertime, you're going to have a little dead zone there where you've burned the grass as well.
Yeah, one of the things that we recommend, and we normally recommend it between Christmas and New Year's. This year, you're still in the window now. You can spray that vinegar formula over your St. Augustine, Bermuda, zoysia, any summer, any warm season grass to kill the winter grasses that are growing right now that are green out there if you don't like that look, and it won't hurt your turf at all. Anybody else?
We won't take your question without that.
I got it, sorry. Will that work on nutsedge?
Yes and no. It will. It will work to burn the tops back, but a lot of times the nutsedge will come back. Trop and I both have experimented, and a lot of us have experimented with killing nutsedge with a whole lot of molasses. Just a heavy-duty amount of either liquid molasses or kind of an extra strong application of dry molasses, and it kills nutsedge. It does it over a long period of time. It slowly rots away the nutlets. The other thing you have to understand about nutsedge or nut grass is that it's a sedge, so it likes wet, anaerobic conditions. If you notice where it's growing, you'll normally see that it's in an area near a sprinkler head or in a place that doesn't drain quite well. And if you fix that drainage problem or treat with hydrogen peroxide is a liquid way of oxygenating an area, that helps to get rid of the nutsedge too. And then spraying the top of the nutsedge with the vinegar formula will kill the top off. It will help with the control.
It's a slow process, but it works. You know, and we ought to try the peroxide and molasses combination.
Yeah.
We haven't done them both together, so.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Oh, sorry, I've got the mic.
Oh, okay, you got the mic, you win.
Howard, a while back you used to just say for house plants that a tablespoon of vinegar in the water was fine. How about using Garrett juice inside?
I recommend it. I recommend it a lot. The Garrett Juice Plus does have fish in it, although today, as opposed to the fish emulsion, he was talking about the Alaska stuff, and those people should have been in jail for what they put on the label. They said it was detoxified or something on the label, which was not true. But the new fish products are not fish emulsion. They're liquid fish or fish hydrolysate, which means they've taken the entire fish and crushed it, bones and all, and it's not just the guts and the waste of the fish. So it's not as offensive smelling in the beginning, and the vinegar and the molasses in the Garrett juice mixture neutralizes it very well. That's what we use at home. Judy grows orchids at home, and she never was interested in interior plants much at all, and that's the only fertilizer that we use is Garrett Juice Plus on everything from orchids to tough plants like mother-in-law's tongue, Sansevieria, and everything in between. If you use apple cider vinegar by itself, it will function as a very mild fertilizer. But if it's the whole Garrett juice mixture fish, seaweed, compost tea, liquid, humate, however you make your Garrett juice, and molasses, that works even better.
Back here.
Speaking of grasshoppers, what is the best way to control the grasshoppers, and when do we start?
Oh boy, you want me to start on this one?
Go ahead.
My because I'm going to have a heck of a problem out there. It's plague-like where I'm at. But I try to leave my fence lines grow up tall where they have a place to congregate. We're getting close to being able to use a product called Nolo bait. Nolo bait's not a kill. There's no really good hardy solution because they move through and go. So put the Nolo bait there where the grasshoppers are congregating and leave those areas. That's what I do, is leave those areas there. And then Tony had actually a good idea, if they get really bad, the floating row cover during the summer months on some of your crops to try to keep those guys off of there. I did find when I was doing the compost tea, spraying with the bile wash in there, it seemed to help. I would add in a lot of times some garlic pepper, all right, to work in the gardens as well. That seemed to help some, but it's ongoing.
The other thing is a product called Kaolin Clay, and Kaolin Clay is effective. It is a repellent. It doesn't kill the grasshoppers. The thing you have to understand about grasshoppers is they didn't read our Texas bug book. They don't function like aphids and a lot of the other insects at just coming in and attacking stressed plants. They come in and attack everything that's in their way. And that's what makes them more difficult to control. So doing the Nolo bait, which is a biological tool, is great. I totally agree with letting fence lines grow up. You can also use beneficial nematodes to kill the young grasshoppers when they're in the ground. But when your crops start to produce, if you spray Kaolin Clay, it puts a white particle film on the plant, and it does work. It has university research. ARS did the research. The commercial product is Surround WP, and it puts a white film on your plants. So if you're wanting to sell that plant, or if you have a cosmetic problem, that's something you have to consider. But it will shut down a great deal of the damage from grasshoppers.
And you've got to spray it, believe me, and kind of in his words, ask me why I know. You can't take the lazy way of just watering the plant and sprinkling it. That didn't work. Yeah. So you've got to, and it's a wettable powder, so you're agitating it, backpack spray or something to keep it, to get it to flow through, to get that solid film over it.
Well, I don't know how long this is going to go on, but I hate to throw a negative wrench into it, but before I leave, I have to make a statement about some of the organic products. I'm more of an environmentalist than I am an organic gardener, although I'm both. And everyone, before they use any product, should look at any kind of negative consequences of that product to the environment where it's produced. Sugar does wonder for your soil. It's great. Dry molasses is a great product, but it's awful on the environment. Sugar production worldwide is causing a tremendous amount of pollution. It's destroying a lot of habitat. It's a terrible product. If you care about other species of animals in other places, your place will look great. Corn, same way. It takes a ton of soil to grow a ton of corn. So before you use it, think of what it's doing to that particular soil. There's some other issues too, but I'm organic. Organic's the way. We don't want to put chemicals on, but you don't want to destroy habitat in other places.
Okay, Mark, you got your saying in once again. Beginning a project with sugars we have no problem with, and we will continue to look for even better solutions to that. But right now we recommend the products that we've been talking about. Yeah, Tony?
Another comment about the the Kaolin Clay, the Surround WP, and this sounds counterintuitive, but it not only doesn't decrease photosynthesis, it somehow increases it. So you would think, if I got this white powder on there, how are my plants going to be able to exchange, sunlight?
Yeah, the university research, and I don't know if it was Cornell or if it was just ARS, but there was real serious research done on this, and the recommendations came out through ARS. That's Agricultural Research Service, part of the USDA. One of the things the USDA has done well is come up with some pretty good recommendations in our industry. What it does basically is kind of like floating row cover. You know, when light comes through floating road cover, it's kind of, the light is refracted. I don't know if that's the right word, but it's changes direction, and it gets all over the leaves much better. The Kaolin Clay on the fruit and on the leaves and everything kind of does the same thing. It actually increases the photosynthesis power of the sun. It's a very interesting thing, but it does. Another one of the research projects that the ARS does that people think I'm kidding about sometimes when I first bring it up is they are the ones that did the research on doing whitewash on the trunks of trees. A lot of you have probably seen old places, especially over in East Texas and some of the places around the United States where the trunks of trees are painted white. I think for many years now, a lot of people have done it cosmetically, but there's really a reason to do it. It repels certain insects, and trees that have real thin bark and you sometimes will get sunburn, none of us recommend wrapping anything around the trunks, but whitewashing the trunk with just diluted white latex paint or a brown color or gray so it matches the trunk of the tree is a really good thing to do, and has this great university research backing up the fact that it helps you with root aphids and a bunch of harmful insects and diseases. And it's just same thing. A lot of the times the whites used looks like it would cause some problems, but it actually is a great benefit.
We have time for one more question.
Johnson grass. I've got one particular area of my lawn that, I mow it real short. I've virtually firebombed it, and Johnson grass just lives there. It comes back. Wish I could patent it.
I'd go with the same thing that's worked, because I've got issues at my property and with the clumps of Johnson grass, that I'll go in there and fork it and aerate it and drench it with liquid molasses and burn it off, continue to kind of work on it with the vinegars. And I actually I have a product that Monterey makes. It's another herbicidal soap. So I've tried it as well, but drench those areas too, because again, what we're doing, what it does, that nutgrass, the microbes in there just start working at it a little bit harder. So
the other thing is, it may not be Johnson grass, you may have Dallas grass. Johnson grass, if you mow it off and mow it off and mow it off or graze it off, it'll tend to die away, but it's the same solution in either case. Dallas grass is a little tougher because it's actually a very large crowned, deep-rooted, high successional quality grass for grazing and whatnot, but it doesn't look good in your yard because it forms these big plate size things. Well, that's Dallas grass. So the best thing is probably the hoe, getting after it with a hoe or a shovel, throwing some compost in the area and letting it grow back and be done with it. Spraying the orange oils, the vinegars, the fatty acid products on them over and over and over will work as well. Well, let me end up here. Did you have anything else?
I'm good. Thank you very much.
Thank you, partner. In conclusion, I can't tell you how delighted we are that all of you are here in person and that all of the people around the United States are tuned in on dirtdoctor.com. The members, of course, you have to be a member of the Organic Club of America to be involved. The exception was the residents of Allen for providing us with this wonderful facility and the great help that everybody has given us. I thank you. I ask that as you go out and talk to other people, family members and friends around the country, tell them about the Organic Club of America. We'll be doing more seminars that'll be on specific subjects where we'll spend the whole time talking about roses or talking about animals or talking about something specific like insect and disease control or whatever you recommend. Give us some feedback about what you'd like to see on future seminars that we can put. And then the final thing is tell people that weren't here that do join, one of the advantages of joining, and there's several there, is that you can now go listen and watch all of this anytime you want to do it. It'll be on the website in podcasts in smaller segments so you can pull up whatever you want to hear again or see again there. And of course, I'm on the air. Most of you here know that tomorrow, 8 to 11, so give us a call and we'll chat more about these things on the air. I thank you very much and talk to you again.